but I just want to get everybody a quick rundown on some thoughts there, and hear the chief if he has anything, that he has pressing on his Chief Miller, if he has anything pressing he'd like to address in his budget. Same for Chief Bush. I'd like to hear from them, bring it to our committee, so we'll be up to speed with them on what their needs are. And
just FYI, Alderman Campbell, based on your earlier sentences, I went ahead and started the meeting, so you are now live.
Okay, well, we'll just call this meeting to order since it is 6 o'clock, 6:01. I'd like to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order, and I'll call the roll, or I'll just call the roll. Alderman Edwards here. Vice Mayor Petrelli.
Here.
And I'm here as well, so we're all here. Thank you. On our first item on our agenda, and like I said, this is really a no voting agenda. This is basically just a discussion type of agenda for us tonight. The light synchronization discussion and the e-pay and budget discussions with both of our chiefs or their designated person to speak for them on their budget. And I'd like to just start with light synchronization discussion because we've had a few traffic accidents on Main Street related at Imperial Boulevard. I've had people send me pictures of those wrecks. And I've also had some bad wrecks down there at Saunders Ferry Road in Main Street. With understanding a car was almost cut in two or something like that just recently down there. And would Chief Jones like to go over your numbers that you have related to those statistics related to Main Street and New Shackle Island, Imperial Boulevard, Oak Shackle, Walton Ferry, Saunders Ferry, Cherokee, and Indian Lake, sir?
Sure. Let me see if I can pull them up here on my phone.
And so I've got them right here in front of me. I printed them out just a moment ago, and I can touch base with them. I was just curious if there were any of those accidents that occurred out there, other than, was it related to the red lights that were so in need of synchronizing, or is it more of one of those things where people just get tired of waiting for the light to change and they're trying to beat the light or stretch the light and causing some problems in doing so?
I think that's one of the biggest issues. I mean, I tell you what we've seen, especially since probably February of this year, is the volume of traffic on Gallatin Road has, for whatever reason, has increased just exponentially. I mean, at rush hour times, morning and evening traffic is always heavy. But even, 10 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the afternoon, the volume of traffic on Gallatin Road has just continued to go up and up and up. And one of the big things we see is a failure on the part of drivers to pay attention. The light turns, yellow, then red, and they just keep going. So they got a gap and they think they can get through it. That's a lot of what we're seeing as far as traffic accidents and issues, or they're on their cell phone and failing to pay appropriate attention to their primary job of just driving. And distracted driving is continues to be a big issue for us.
Sure. Do any of the committee members have anything you'd like to ask or comment regarding some of these accidents we've had on Main Street? And I can give you the numbers. New Shackle Island, we've had 7. Imperial's had 18 wrecks. Old Shackle 13. Walton Ferry 6. Saunders Ferry 17. Cherokee 9. And Indian Lake 18. So just to give you some numbers there in case you weren't aware of the numbers.
And that's for all of last year, from January 1 of last year to December 31st of 2020.
Yes, sir.
Well, if you look at the numbers for this year, with the exception of maybe Indian Lake and Old Shackle, all of the roads are on track to way exceed the statistics from last year. Like if you look at Imperial, last year we had 18, and here we are a quarter of the way through the year, and Imperial's already had 5. So that means we're on track on average for 20. I've seen 2 accidents in that intersection in the last 2 days. I know about 2 years ago, there was concern about that intersection, and I do not recall, Pat, you were on Public Works, you might remember. Is Marshall on this call?
I don't
No.
see Marshall. No.
Okay. I remember there was a question about the light, something about the timing was off when folks were trying to go across to the strip mall where there's the Ace Hardware and Bargain Hunt. But it seems like something's off there. And I do agree with Assistant Police Chief Jones is that, I mean, rush hour pretty much starts now at noon here. You know, you can't get from Imperial to Cherokee in under 15 minutes, which is ridiculous. So I guess we're going to have to request information from the Public Works Department. You know, where exactly are we at with light synchronization, and are any of the lights
And
off? Go ahead.
And I'll definitely agree with you. I think light synchronization throughout the city would help. I don't know that that's going to completely alleviate some of the problems we're seeing as what's causing those crashes, though.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, anything would be an improvement over the traffic flow that we currently have.
Sure. Mayor Clary, are you on the call? Okay, because I remember Mayor Clary speaking with Public Works one time about that intersection with the light. So anyway, I appreciate Chairman Campbell bringing this up, but I am very concerned about that intersection at Imperial. Thank you.
I am as well.
So-
I travel it every day of the week.
If I could, I'd like to say one thing. So when the legislator changed the law that says if you're in the middle of an intersection and the light turns red, you're legal, and they changed that law. Before that, you were not legal. If you saw a yellow light, it meant start slowing down to stop. And once that law's been changed, I think it's been about 2 years, I think, Jim. I think we've seen an increase in red light accidents. The other situation at Old Shackle, if we ever get that realignment where you don't have 2 red lights, you know, within 40 feet of one another, I think that will help a lot too.
And Chief Miller, if I could say something, Chief Miller, I agree. That light at the Walton Ferry, I mean, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, traffic is backed up from that intersection all the way to in front of Black Eyed Pea, right in front of my office. I mean, it is horrible. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to get from my office just to pass that intersection. So,
Yeah.
well, and Chairman Campbell, I think you're the only one on the Capital Projects Committee. Did you say, if you said it, I missed it, what the status is? Do we have any idea when that funding will be approved for light synchronization?
No, sir, we don't. I mean, it's going through the state of Tennessee. They kicked it back after it had already been approved. Someone went back through the legal documentation of the right of ways of all the intersections involved, and they started questioning right of ways that go back 30 years. And when you do that, we have to have claim deeds apparently on property to make sure it's under the city's ownership right away. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And once that's cleared up, the state will move forward. I'm afraid to say that sometimes I feel like they just do that to put the brakes on projects. And unfortunately, Hendersonville catches a lot of these brake pumping project stopping programs. I mean, Rockland Road, Walton Ferry, red light synchronization, Stop 30, Drake's Creek. I mean, the list goes on. And then trying to tie other projects to like the Winston Hills underpass and the exit ramp there, trying to realign that. They're waiting to see where we're going with that before they do that. And it's domino effect of stalled, slowed state projects. I would really like to see our city take some of these projects on ourselves, and we can expedite the programs and the projects and move it forward ourselves. Now, yes, we would have to pay 100% of the bill. But do you want to wait 30 years to realign a road or make a road safer, such as Rockland Road? Or do we want to say, hey, in 5 years, we can pay for that, especially if we could set up I'm going to talk about something me and Mr. Free have spoken about, Director Free, about a capital projects account where we start putting money aside, and maybe it's from the fees that we take from these subdivisions and things of this nature that are coming in. We start taking a portion of those funds and setting them off to the side for capital project improvements, which will go strictly for those type of projects that are on the books that are languishing due to the state moving them forward or the funding, the lack of funding through the city of Hendersonville. So those are just some thoughts I have about that. And if Director Free would like to speak about that a little bit, he can do that as well, since he's joined us here in our meeting. And also Alderman Edwards and Vice Mayor Petrelli, if y'all like to speak on those ideas too, feel free to at any time. Thank you.
Well, I don't have anything more to add to the conversation. I appreciate the stats that were pulled. Before we move to the next agenda item, I would like to thank our fire and police last night for putting out a fire off of Gallatin Road in Old Shackle. I literally started getting calls, and I asked those people to please call 911. And so I encourage anybody, if you see something, please call 911. It was a pretty impressive fire, and I would just like to thank our public safety officials, Hendersonville Fire, for how quickly they got that fire put out. It was put out almost immediately. And also HPD, there was several people over at the Bank of America, and they watched you guys clearing buildings, even though the strip mall was not affected. So thank you guys for your excellent service. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Alderman Edwards.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap that up. Unless Director Free would like to say something regarding the capital projects. We've had conversations over the last few years regarding capital projects and these major road projects about funding them and having them ready to go versus always waiting for the state and to take so long. So if Director Free would like to say anything regarding that, he's welcome to. If not, we'll move right along to budget discussion with everyone else.
Yeah, I can just say, I can just talk about it really quick. You know, I think it's something where what the alderman was talking about is having eventually a capital improvement program where we have large projects, which would include large transportation projects. Some of those could be things that might be partnerships we do with the state or with federal money, but then also looking at large projects that were small enough that we could tackle, and looking at things where it might be a project, if we tackled it with the state, maybe be a $6-8 million project, and you know, we'd be in for 1.2 or 2 million for it. But instead looking at what maybe we could do for $1.5 million, 2 million, to go ahead and make some significant improvements over the short period. But at some point in time, to really tackle these major transportation projects and not be dependent upon the state and their drawn out lengthy process, is to create an account where each year, you know, we could undertake major transportation improvements on our own.
Thank you, Director Free. I appreciate that. That's our conversation we've been having for a few years now. And I look forward to working something out with you on that, sir.
Is that something that we could start this year? Because we have some massive projects coming down the pipeline where just our 10%, like for instance, the Walton Ferry interchange, what is our portion of that?
Oh, yes. It's around a $12 million project, they're saying. So you're probably looking at $1.2 million. I think it's a 90-10 project.
Okay, so if you multiply that by 5 to 10 projects, you know, we're getting into big bucks. So it seems like maybe this budget, we start to accommodate that now. And I guess my question would be, and maybe Director Free, you would know, if we were to start allocating funds for capital projects, what department would that go under? Would that be under Public Works, since they're typically considered capital assets? Or would it be planning?
It could be something. I mean, really, it's based in finance. So, you know, in a lot of cities, it would be based out of the finance department.
Okay, so the finance department.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just setting money aside, and then the departments all having all of their major projects that would go into that. I'd say probably to undertake something like that, probably a little bit late to tackle something like that this year, but it could be a goal in the next year, in the coming year, to look at long term in doing that. But I mean, it takes substantial. Once you have a plan, and then you say, hey, we're going to spend $3 or $4 million a year toward that plan, and here's our priorities. I mean, it takes a lot of money off the table on the general fund.
Sure.
To do that. But also you can achieve a lot of things in a very short period of time. And I think Marshall's not on here right now, but what Marshall does is with Walton Ferry or all those different major projects that are very expensive, and we have a match, and say, like on the one that you all were talking about, that we might have a 1.2 or $2 million match. All that isn't due at once. It's, they have the engineering's done, and then we might pay a part of that, and then the property acquisition, and then they start the construction in different phases. So usually we don't have to have all that money at once, and then Marshall kind of projects that out. So we're kind of doing that now, but that's just with our major TDOT projects that we're
Sure.
doing. So.
Well, and I do agree all about strategic plans, just like we are starting to approach with paving after 4 years. But I don't see why we wouldn't start setting aside money now. I mean, our general fund is bare minimum, and if we don't start saving today, when are we going to start planning for that? So even if it was a minuscule placeholder amount of $50,000, we've got to start doing this. Otherwise, next year's budget is going to be pretty tremendous when it comes to these major TDOT projects. We're just not going to have the liquidity to do it, and we're going to have to go back to bonding or whatever. So I'd like to see the city becoming more proactive in how we're saving our funds for future use, and just planning ahead a little bit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Director Free. I appreciate that input. And I'm going to just wrap that up for our light synchronization conversation, because we do want to talk about our budgets coming up, and we've got about 15 more minutes before they start yelling at us. So I'm going to ask Chief Jones if he'd like to just touch some of his highlights in his budget and some of the things that they're pushing for this year, police cars, officers, things of this nature. And if you would, the floor is yours. Chief Miller, I'll let you speak first if you would like, but I know I've spoken with Chief Jones. So whichever one would like to speak about it, feel free to, sir. Thank you.
I'll just speak about the people, and Jim's got all the data on the other items that are just essential. We asked for 7 people, one of those being a sergeant's position, because our flex team doesn't really have a supervisor. That they rely on the evening shift detective sergeant, but he goes off at 12 and they're on to 4. And so I think it's a critical thing to put a sergeant over the flex team, particularly when they're involved in such high level activities. And our detective unit is in dire need of, because of the increasing cases that we're doing, of having another detective. So we asked for 7. Our 5-year plan we gave you all a copy of had 5 for last year and 5 for this year. And last year we put off getting anybody, and then we got the grant, so it gave us 3. We were told that in January we'd probably be able to hire those additional 2, which we did not. And so this year's plan was for 5. And if we catch up with our 5-year plan, it would require 7. And that's really all I got to say. Jim will have the breakdown on the cars and the technology equipment.
All right, sir. Assistant Chief Jones would like to speak about that real quick.
Yes, sir. So basically the situation, and I know the board's aware of that, we've been trying to keep up, just to keep the cars from having excessive mileage, of replacing roughly 20 cars a year when possible. Back years ago when we had 45, 50 officers, we were trying to replace 8 to 10 cars a year. Now we're at 132. So in order to keep on some type of replacement schedule, especially as we add more personnel, we're working to get 20 cars a year. Last year, with the COVID restrictions and all, and we were able to purchase 10 cars with the board's permission, but it came from the governor's grant. So when you see the change in our budget this year, one of the big issues is that the cars are added back in where they weren't even in. The cars and equipment weren't even in the budget last year. It's kind of actually an aside. So we're still running 2012 cars, and we're hopeful this year to get all of the Crown Vics completely out of the fleet. And the newest Crown Vic we have is a 2008.
Crown Vic's a good vehicle, but yes, sir, I think we've
so you can
drove it
imagine the
good.
mileage and wear and tear on the vehicle. I'm so sure.
I said a Crown Vic is a good vehicle, but yes, sir, if it's a 2008, I think we've gotten our mileage out of it. We're rode it well. So yes, sir.
We have, sir. And we're running into now the 2012 and 13 Caprices are starting to cost us quite a bit of money to keep them on the road. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that y'all might have.
Any aldermen, any committee members have questions they'd like to add regarding their budget or any questions? I agree. Last year we did cut budgets. We held back on spending, but this year's the year we need to try to catch up if all possible. So we have to keep that in mind going into this budget as a committee and taking care of our departments that we represent on that committee process. So look forward to working with you gentlemen and pushing your needs forward, as well as the other aldermen, I'm sure. Chief Bush, are you available?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
If you'd like to go over your department needs, feel free to give us a rundown. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I have, thanks for the kind words, Peg. I do have a great staff, that's for sure. I have discussed with Mayor and Paul my budget. Some of my things in my budget are depending on grants. I did put the air packs in this year's budget because if you guys remember, we've been talking about them for a couple of years now, and the need for those to be replaced has to occur, if not this year, by next year at the latest. We have applied for an AFG to have those replaced. We won't know until maybe May, the end of May, beginning of June, if we're going to get that. And then, of course, we also applied for a SAFER grant that obviously will come back before you folks for 15 more staff members. And that's going to be 100% paid for 3 years. The city won't have to pay anything for those. But obviously, that'll be a decision you folks have to make if we get accepted into that. I do have some money in building maintenance. Station 3, we're doing some remodeling work due to the governor's grant money last year. We're asking for some money for Station 3. It's a dual company station that actually houses an ambulance. So that station runs about 12 to 14 people out of it a day, and it's in dire need of some upgrades and some new flooring, etc. So I did ask for some extra money there. There's computers that we're going to have to buy for Engine 7. Also a replacement one. So if we have one that goes down, we don't have to ship it off and that piece of equipment be without a computer. So that's a couple of things we're asking for. Also what we call speed trays. These are things that we load our hose onto and put in our cross lays for quick fire attacks. So we're asking for a couple of extra of those this year. And then just general maintenance cost, our vehicle maintenance cost, our travel and training. I'm pushing that down on folks, and folks are taking full advantage of that and going to classes locally and out of state, which is good for the city and the education and the training that they bring back for us to use here. Those are just a few of the things off the top of my head that I can think of. And again, some of that stuff is going to be based off grant money. Obviously, if we get the AFG and or the SAFER, some of that stuff will disappear. I've got the electronics for Marine One. They're all bad now. They're not syncing with each other. They're not working correctly. That includes the side sonar. that our dive team uses when we're doing a body recovery in Old Hickory Lake. Those are in there. Headsets for our apparatus, which protects our hearing and gives us the ability to hear communications going to calls. The apparatus are super nice, but they're awful loud when you're riding inside. So those are just a few of the things that we feel like as a department that we need to seek funding for and put into use.
Thank you, Chief Bush. Any of the aldermen and committee members have any comments they'd like to make regarding the fire department?
Well, I do for both departments. Since we're kind of emerging out of this COVID year, and I know that really cut into professional development, certification classes, and being able to keep up with their credentials and also further their credentials. I'd like to make sure that both of our departments have that in the budget this year. So thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least,
Hey, Pat, just real quick, I guess I could say we did have 3 positions and another administrative assistant too that we had in last year's budget, but due to COVID, we pulled those due to the hiring freeze that was placed upon us. I have asked for those positions to be filled in this year's budget as well. However, if we get the 15 SAFER grant, if you guys allow for us to participate in that, we won't need to hire those 3. We still would like to have the administrative assistant too. We've gotten big enough now that my clerical staff that only consists of 2, we certainly could use a 3rd one.
Yes, sir. That input and that information. Also, I'd like to go over the e-pay issues right now, both the departments and both chiefs or assistant chief or whoever would like to speak on regards on behalf of each department. I've had a few conversations with both departments. I'd like to bring it up to our committee to have a conversation about the e-pay issues, the education pay, and moving forward through the ranks of departments, and to bring it here to this committee so we can discuss it prior to voting on anything in BOMA. So, Chief Miller or Chief Jones, would y'all like to start the conversation regarding e-pay and how it impacts the police department, or how it will impact the police department, or has impacted the police department? Thank you.
Chief, you want me to take that?
Yes.
You're our e-pay expert.
Well, I think in the past, we've had some discussions, and the primary issue, and I'm going to say this, is I think that BOMA in October 13 of 2020 made their intent as far as a certain group of employees in both police and fire that were going to be impacted by changes to the e-pay rule. I think BOMA made their intent very clear in October of 2020, and would just ask that if y'all would review that, what was done in October 2020, and leave that in place as it is in order to take care of those 14 employees and keep them from being negatively impacted by any changes to that. I think I mentioned before, I realize that one of the comments has been that it treats certain employees different. And probably the most ready example I can give anybody is that we currently have a large group of city employees who were hired before September 1997, where their accrued sick time is treated one way upon retirement, and another group of city employees that are treated a different way if they were hired after September 1997. So there was a rule change, and I understand that those do occur, but at the time that was implemented, BOMA said, we're going to keep that in place for those employees that were hired prior to that date, and it will change for anybody hired after that date. So the reality is, even today, we have a reasonable sized group of employees hired before September 1997 that are treated differently from those that are hired after that. And so, if this is going to be a rule change, and I understand, I don't totally agree with that. But if it does happen, I don't see an issue with continuing as BOMA did in October of 2020 with Ordinance 2020-33, with keeping those employees exempted and, making it understood that irrespective of their status or changes in their status, as long as they remain employed by the city, that's not going to change.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that information. Thank you. Chief Bush, would you like to share any thoughts you might have from the fire department side of it? Because we're up against the clock now on time here, guys. Thank you.
I don't mind speaking at 6:30. I don't know what we need to do. Obviously, that's a decision. I think it was rolling over to general committee as well, if I'm not mistaken. I just need some clarity on whether you want to continue on or
You
not.
can continue on real quick. I mean, for a moment, we'll talk.
Okay, sure. So in my department, it does not directly affect anybody. It will not change anything for any of my staff. Now, we did talk about this a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to get the e-pay added back in. That is a true statement. But as it sits right now, this will not negatively affect anybody in my agency.
All right, so I appreciate that information. Anyone else on the committee have anything you'd like to add to this conversation right now?
Chairman Campbell, I have a question. Is this supposed to go before BOMA in 2 weeks? Does this need to go before any more committees?
I'm not sure about other committees that it needs to go to, but I do believe it's coming to BOMA in approximately 2 weeks. I would think the general committee might be the committee to review it. Maybe I don't know, finance needs to talk about it or not, since it is a pay scale that we're talking about. So anyways, I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to talk about that.
I just didn't know if we needed some action for us to vote on this.
That's why I said it's more of a discussion topic for us to get educated and up to speed with how it impacts both departments as a committee. I don't really think we need to vote on anything right now. We can come back at a later time and discuss it in more depth and detail and vote on it.
It's on general committee tonight if we get to general committee.
All right, sir. Well, I'm fixing to stop my meeting and turn it over to you, sir. We have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn our meeting. It's been properly seconded. All in favor, say aye. I'm going to call your name. Alderman Edwards.
Aye.
Alderman Petrelli.
Aye.
Chair is aye likewise. Thank everyone for your participation and have topics to continue to discuss. Thank you very much.